I wasn't the only one working late. I work in an office where late hours aren't unusual. Deadlines come and go, and sometimes staying after everyone leaves just feels easier than rushing the work. That building had never bothered me before. It was old but clean, busy during the day, quiet at night, predictable. That night I stayed late because I had to. Most of the office cleared out by 9. By 10, the entire floor was dark except for my section. I remember noticing how silent everything felt once the last elevator went down. No conversations, no phones ringing, just the low hum of air conditioning and the glow of my monitor. I was focused on my work when I heard the copier start up. It wasn't loud, just the familiar mechanical sound of paper feeding through. I barely reacted at first. My assumption was simple. Someone else had stayed late too. That happens. I didn't even look up. A few minutes later, the copier stopped. Then I heard water running. It sounded like it was coming from the washroom down the corridor. The sink turned on, ran briefly, and shut off. That got my attention. I leaned back in my chair and listened. There were no footsteps, no voices, just silence again. I told myself it was probably the cleaning staff. They came in late sometimes. The explanation fit well enough to let me keep working. Not long after that, I heard a chair move. Not inside my office, outside it. It was the sound of a rolling chair being pulled back slightly, then settling again. I sat up straight and looked toward the glass wall of my cabin. The corridor beyond it was dark, but for a second I thought I saw movement. Not a person, just a shift, like someone stepping out of view. I stood up and opened the door. The corridor was empty. Every desk was exactly how it had been earlier. Chairs pushed in, lights off. No signs that anyone else was there. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening. Nothing. I went back inside and locked my door. That was new for me. I'd never felt the need to lock it before. After that, the sounds came sporadically. A drawer closing somewhere down the floor. The faint beep of a printer waking up and going back to sleep. Once, I heard the elevator bell ring, the soft ding it makes when it reaches a floor. The elevator never arrived. At that point, I called building security. The guard arrived a few minutes later, walking the floor with a flashlight. He checked the washroom, the copier area, the stairwell. He found nothing. When I told him what I'd heard, he checked his system and frowned slightly. According to his screen, only one access card was active on that floor. Mine. He suggested it could be machines reacting to power fluctuations or sensors misfiring. He said old buildings do that sometimes. His tone wasn't dismissive, just practical. After he left, the floor felt even quieter than before. I finished my work as quickly as I could and left not long after. By the time I reached the parking lot, I had convinced myself I'd imagined most of it. Stress has a way of filling in gaps when you're tired. A few days later, there was an internal email. It was brief, vague. It mentioned an incident involving an employee who worked on the same floor as me. The timing stood out immediately. Late night, after hours, investigation ongoing, no further details provided. People talked quietly about it for a while, but nothing official was ever shared. No explanation, no closure. That's when the memory of that night came back in pieces. The copier, the water, the chair, the elevator sound. If the system showed only my access card active, then who was using the equipment? And why did everything stop whenever I stepped into the corridor? I still work there. I still stay late sometimes. But now, before I start, I always check which access cards are active in the building. And if I hear anything I can't immediately explain, I don't investigate anymore. Because the most unsettling part of that night wasn't the sounds themselves. It was realizing that whatever was moving around that floor never wanted to be seen. It just needed to know who was alone. At this point, I need to ask you something. If you were sure you were alone in that building, would you have checked the corridor? Or stayed inside and hoped nothing confirmed it? Story 2. The night I stayed in that hotel. I travel often for work, and because of that, hotels stopped feeling special a long time ago. I don't look for luxury anymore. I just need a place that's clean, quiet, and close enough to where I'm supposed to be the next morning. That trip was no different. I arrived late, checked into a small budget hotel, and went straight up to my room without paying much attention to anything around me. The hotel felt ordinary. Narrow corridors, dim lighting, patterned carpet that had probably been there for years. Nothing about it stood out. It was already past midnight, and I was tired enough that all I wanted was to sleep and leave early the next morning. I locked the door, placed my bag near the desk, and lay down on the bed with the lights off. That's when I first heard movement in the corridor. At first it sounded like footsteps, slow and uneven, the kind you hear when someone is walking without a clear destination. I ignored it. Hotels are full of strangers, and late-night noise isn't unusual. A few minutes later, I heard voices, not loud enough to understand, just low conversation echoing through the hallway. Again, I told myself it was probably other guests returning to their rooms. I rolled onto my side, facing the door, and tried to sleep. Then there was a knock. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive. It was soft, hesitant, like someone unsure if they should even be knocking at all. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe properly for a few seconds. I stared at the door, waiting for another knock or a voice. Nothing came. I convinced myself it was a mistake. Maybe someone had the wrong room. Maybe someone knocked and realized it too late. I stayed where I was, listening. After a short while, I heard footsteps moving away down the corridor. I relaxed, just enough to lie back and close my eyes again. A few minutes passed, maybe 10, then I saw movement under the door. A shadow passed slowly across the thin gap between the door and the floor. It didn't stop, it didn't hesitate, it just moved past, as if someone was walking calmly toward the end of the corridor. That's when the second knock came. This one was just as soft as the first. I don't know why I decided to get up that time. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear of what would happen if I didn't. I walked to the door quietly and opened it just a few inches, keeping the chain on. The corridor was empty. No footsteps, no voices, just the dim hallway stretching out in both directions. At the far end, I thought I saw something shift, like a shadow turning the corner, but by the time I focused on it, there was nothing there. I closed the door and locked it again, my heart beating harder than it should have. I told myself I was overreacting. Still, I couldn't lie back down properly after that. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the door, listening for any sound. Eventually, I called the front desk and explained what had happened. They took it seriously enough to send security to check the corridor. I watched through the peephole as they walked past my room, checked both ends of the hallway, and spoke quietly into their radios. A few minutes later, they called me back and told me they hadn't found anyone. They suggested it might have been another guest, or maybe someone knocking on the wrong door. Their tone was calm, professional, reassuring. I wanted to believe them. Still, I went downstairs myself and asked if they could check the corridor cameras. I stood there while they replayed the footage from earlier that night. The screen showed the hallway outside my room, grainy and slightly angled. At the times I mentioned, there was movement, but not a person. Just a dark shape passing through part of the frame, partially hidden by a blind spot near the corner. No clear face, no body, nothing definitive. I went back to my room and stayed awake until morning. I don't remember sleeping at all. When daylight finally came, the hotel felt different, safer somehow. I checked out early and left without looking back. A few days later, I read a short news article online. There had been a murder at that same hotel. It happened that night. The victim was found in a room on the same floor as mine, the room next to mine. The article didn't give many details, just that the investigation was ongoing and there was no clear suspect. No usable CCTV footage showing the killer entering or leaving the corridor. That's when everything from that night replayed in my head. The soft knocking, the hesitation, the shadow moving away. I still don't know what to believe. I don't know if someone was asking for help and never got it, or if someone was quietly checking which rooms were occupied before deciding where to go next. What I do know is this. If I had opened the door fully, even once, things might have ended very differently. And ever since that night, whenever I stay in a hotel, I listen carefully to the corridor. Because sometimes the most important knock isn't the loud one. It's the one that almost doesn't happen. I still don't know who knocked on that door. And what scares me most is realizing, if I had reacted just a little differently, this story might not have ended with me leaving that hotel alive. If this story made you uncomfortable, comment the knock and tell me why. Like the video if you believe some doors are safer left unopened. And subscribe, because the next story might make you rethink ignoring sounds at night.